Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Banker Next Door. I am your host, Dr. Joe Berquist. I hope everyone is having a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend and enjoying all the time with family and friends. So I thought I would do something a little fun this weekend. I thought I would do a review of the kind of limited series on Netflix called Big Vape, The Rise and Fall of Juul. And I want to get in and just add my little screen here for everyone so we could take a look at this. So Big Vape, The Rise and Fall of Juul. This was a limited series that just came on Netflix not too long ago. And I had a chance to watch this and review it. And I just thought it was an absolutely excellent business case. I thought there were some incredibly great lessons to be learned here. And hopefully at the end, I'm gonna tie back into like, how does this relate to banking? Like, why would this be important to a banker or to a banking environment, and how these things kind of work. So if I could set the stage here, I'm going to go into the first slide. So just to give everybody a little bit of background here. So basically, this was released in 2023. The documentary was based on the book Big Vape by Jamie Dusharme. And Juul was founded by James Monsees and Adam Bowen. And the synopsis here is basically this is a limited series following the founders of the vaping company Juul, how they got started, what went right, what went wrong, and how they ultimately got forced out of the company. The runtime is approximately 4 episodes at approximately 200 minutes, which is roughly about 50 minutes per episode. So not too long, nothing too crazy there with that. So as we get into the story here, it basically starts out with again James and Adam, these two students who were Stanford students, and basically started out with a thesis where they basically said we think we can improve upon the tobacco industry. We think we can make a product that will be safer than smoking cigarettes. And the theory there really came from the fact that with a cigarette, you basically have to light it up. You have to burn the tobacco leaves that the tobacco is wrapped in order to, and as the delivery system, in order to get the hit of nicotine, which is embedded inside of the cigarette. So their theory was we can come up with an electronic device that basically can be used so that no tobacco paper would be needed, no lighting of any kind would be needed. It would basically be almost like a direct injection system that would just deliver the nicotine straight to you. So that was basically the thesis here. I think the irony is that they said that the whole purpose of the company was to stop people from smoking. We're gonna come back to that in a minute, but. So they used big tobacco research to come up with the formula for the nicotine. They basically created what was called a salted nicotine, which basically went into the Juul, like the cartridge. So the Juul. So I'm going to take a step back for a second here. You can kind of see in the picture here of the delivery system. It almost looked like like a pen or like a thick pen or almost like a thumb drive. And basically the nicotine cartridge just kind of plugged into the top of it, and then you just vaped it. There was no on off button, nothing like that. You just plugged the cartridge in, a little light popped up basically saying that, like, yeah, you're fully charged and ready to go. And then you just start puffing on this thing. You just start vaping. The interesting thing was that the device itself could just be plugged in, could be recharged by plugging it into a simple USB drive, and then that came down to other issues that we're going to also get into later about how they were tracking and other things that they were doing with some of the customers. So, but let's get back down here for a second. So they used big tobacco research to come up with the formula for the nicotine. They basically came up with an assortment of colors and different flavors that they used to market. I think they had like mango and mint were a couple of the big and most I would say the most popular type flavors they were using. So typical with a tech startup company is that they had a mantra of move fast and break things. That unfortunately did not go for them so well in this whole thing, and I think we're going to see here in a minute or two why that really blew up in their face on this one. And then we get into the marketing campaign. Now the marketing campaign was a very, very interesting aspect to this whole thing, because as a tech company, they obviously wanted to market to younger crowd. I mean, I think they really saw themselves as kind of like the Apple of the tobacco industry, so to speak. I think that was kind of how they were looking at themselves. Um, and they did create a technically a tech product, uh, but again they got into the cigarette industry, and that's where I think things really kind of went askew with that. So the marketing campaign ended up focusing on basically teenagers and basically young kids. And the marketing campaign, they basically put this whole thing together in a month, brought in this gentleman to come in and produce the marketing campaign for them, and they really wanted to market themselves as not a product, but basically a lifestyle brand. Juul was a lifestyle. It was part of being cool and hip, and you want to focus on the younger kids. The irony of what happened with that is that they took all this research from Big Tobacco in terms of trying to create the nicotine formula that they were going to use in their product. They ignored all the research from Big Tobacco in terms of their advertising, the history of their advertising, and then also the negative effects of nicotine. They seem to just totally miss all that research that obviously proved to be quite important. Now, the funny thing is, if you go back to the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, all of the gimmicks, if you will, of the marketing campaign that was used by Juul was actually also used by Big Tobacco. It was selling cigarettes as a lifestyle brand. It was, cigarettes were all used by actors and by famous people, but in particularly young people, teenagers, young adults. It was cool and hip to be smoking cigarettes and have your lighter and all this kind of stuff, and Juul basically did the exact same thing in their marketing campaign. Now, obviously, what's interesting is that Big Tobacco in the decades since, they have been very limited in the type of advertising that they can do, and of course, they can't market to anybody under the age of 18. So Juul, because it was a tech company, was able to kind of get away with a bunch of stuff in their initial marketing campaigns that Big Tobacco couldn't do. So moving on here, so as the company began to grow in its first couple of years, they ran into some typical problems of any startup company. They basically had some quality issues as they began to produce more and more of their product, had some major supply chain issues. Again, these are kind of normal type issues, I think, for any type of startup company. James, who was the CEO, I mean, this kind of proved to be a little bit too much for him. So they removed him and brought in a guy named Kevin Burns. He becomes CEO. Then the company, Kevin was kind of a supply chain expert. So it made a lot of sense as to at the moment why they brought him in. So he kind of fixes those issues, moves things along. Now the company really blows up 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. And the company now it ends up with a $10 billion market valuation. And a unicorn was a company with a valuation of $1 billion. So they had to come up with kind of a new name for a startup that had a 10 billion value. And they came up with this name, this decacorn. So which I thought was kind of corny, but interesting none the same. So they were a decacorn. So now here's where all the things start coming in. So in 2012, less than 1% of teenagers were using cigarettes. That's because there were just a lot of negative connotations towards cigarette usage. Obviously getting cancer, just the smell of it, all the kind of negative aspects of smoking. So you really was in 2012, there was really no issue with teenagers and smoking at that point. Social media then began to glamorize Juul as a lifestyle. Vaping just became a phenomenon, just almost overnight. In 2017, it just took off, and it all gets back to that kind of original marketing campaign. And then social media got in there, and then boom, and then it just went. And what they found out was that kids got addicted to the nicotine. Surprise, surprise. Again, they obviously skipped over that research on all the decades of research on nicotine and how addictive it is. So the kids got addicted to the nicotine, and what they found out was they got addicted to it almost instantly. Almost instantly, they got addicted to the nicotine. Now, Juul claimed that it was safer because you didn't have to burn the tobacco leaves to get to the nicotine hit, so to speak. However, what they found out was that Juul delivered more nicotine in their cartridge than you would have gotten if you just smoked a cigarette. So while you didn't have the burning tobacco leaves, you had a lot more nicotine in there when as part of that vaping system. So you were taking in a tremendous amount more nicotine in there. So, and then of course, obviously, as a lot of people know that have done any kind of research on big tobacco, is it nicotine? Once you get addicted to it, it basically you can be addicted to it for decades, not days, weeks, months, years, decades. It could take almost a lifetime to get off of this stuff. And then basically what happened is you ended up having the vape equivalent of chain smoking amongst teenagers that basically ballooned out. Now, while all this is going on, obviously the company is taking off. Their sales go from 200 million in 2017 to over $1 billion in 2018. Basically, they looked into it. Basically, the flavors and the advertising campaign, the social media. This is what was hooking the kids. But then it gets worse than that. There were, as they explain, you have to watch the documentary to kind of get the gist of this, but there were actually people that were coming into high schools and were pushing Juul as like the safe alternative to smoking, even though they didn't really have a problem with kids smoking at that point. But you had actually people in there pushing this product to the kids, which is just, kind of, mind blowing. The FDA finally, 2017, 2018, the FDA finally begins to wake up to basically say, hey, there might be a problem here. What was interesting, though, and I think this is a very common issue with a lot of Silicon Valley tech issue, that, when the FDA and some of the government legislators, other people basically started to come in and talk to the founders of Juul, it was basically like, well, what are you going to do to try to fix this? And it was like, well, tech is always the answer. So it's just what we need is just more tech. That's what we need. We just need more tech. And it gets into the fact that they were, they had the ability to, because again, the device plugs into USB, there's an app. They were able to track people's usage. They could tell how much people were using. And so therefore, they knew exactly, like if a kid was getting addicted to this stuff, they could see like, oh, okay, these guys are going through 2-3 cartridges a day of this stuff. Therefore, they are now addicted and they've, they now have a problem. So, but again, as we all know, more tech is not necessarily the answer in life. So moving on here, kind of what happens. Altria, the big tobacco company, comes in and purchases a 35% stake in Juul in 2019. They then use that big bonus to basically pay out $2 billion to all the employees of Juul. So a bunch of the employees got, $1 million, $2 million bonuses. Adam and James obviously made themselves a lot of money out of that. But then things really begin to turn over the July 4th weekend of 2019. And that's when hospitals started admitting kids with lung problems. After this, basically moms get involved. The FDA and Congress start to ask a lot of questions. A lot of the pushback starts. And then James gets called up onto Capitol Hill to basically testify and do some testimony here. And what comes out is basically that they had no evidence that vaping was safer than cigarettes. None, because again, with a product like this, the problem is, it gets back to that tech philosophy of move fast and break things. Well, but again, it's you weren't really a tech company. You were a cigarette company, and you were promoting a cigarette product with nicotine, which is a highly addictive, chemical. And companies, big pharma, again, they've done decades and decades of research on all this different stuff, psychology, marketing, product advertisement. It's why there are so many safeguards around cigarettes today. And again, and so it really wasn't a shock. Again, a company that's only been around for 6, 7, 8 years, that they had no evidence that vaping was safer than cigarettes. Why would they? So then you have the statistics start coming out by 2019 that 28% of high school kids and 11% of middle school kids were vaping and had vaping problems. So then Juul's answer to this was to then run a switching campaign to show that how many people had switched from cigarettes to vaping. And the the irony I see in that is that they said that they wanted to get rid of cigarettes because cigarettes were quote unquote bad for you. But I don't see the idea there is to get people to stop smoking. Like, I don't see how you go from smoking a cigarette to vaping, which is hitting you with more nicotine than the cigarette was and keeping you addicted to the nicotine. I don't see how that's, I don't see at the end of the day how that's really helping anybody. But so I just thought that the whole switching campaign was something that just came off as being completely tone deaf. So now you have kids that are coming forth. These kids have lung damage. Now, here's the interesting thing. Juul then at this point begins to blame it on what's called THC that was basically used in aftermarket products that were being used with the Juul device. So in other words, aftermarket companies were coming up with a different formula for the cartridges which use THC. And then also, marijuana, other things like that were being used in the Juul devices, and that was what was giving kids the lung damage, not the Juul product itself. I think that remains to be seen. And as you'll see here in a minute, that was kind of one of my criticisms of the documentary, was that I would have liked to, I kept waiting for them to get to this part of the aftermarket, the drug use that was really fueling the explosion of the vaping amongst kids. And they really didn't get into that. Like, they really didn't touch on that. So kind of moving on from that, now we get into this. So again, James goes up to Capitol Hill. He's now in front of Congress, and he basically gets, just crushed in front of Congress. Things go really bad. Just doesn't really go well for him there. Now the company's got more problems. And then the CEO, Kevin, he goes on to CNBC, and it just has a disaster of an interview on CNBC as well. And things are they're just rolling downhill. So what kind of happens at the end? Well, between the end of 2019 to, I'd say, 2022, you have the sales collapse. You have basically the FDA has now put them through a process of being able to introduce new products, like what they should have done with their initial product from the very beginning. But anyway, they fail that process, but now they're appealing it. Kevin gets fired as the CEO. James and Adam are basically forced out of the company, so they decide to take off. Big Tobacco, with Altria owning a 35% stake, they now basically come in, take over the company, insert their own CEO, their own marketing people, and they're basically running Juul now. The company has paid out over $3 billion in settlements to people that have been injured from the product. Funny how it was the aftermarket stuff and not their product that did it, but yet they still ended up paying out $3 billion in settlements. So Juul is still there, but the future is very uncertain. So I don't know what the remains to be seen what happens with that. So this whole documentary was really fascinating, and I think you could relate. There was a lot of very similar examples to this in the market right now. Robinhood, the trading app, which I think Robinhood used a lot of gamification in their app to try to basically get people to get hooked on trading. And that's I could do a whole nother episode just on that, just talking about Robinhood and things that there's a lot of unscrupulous things that are going on with Robinhood that I don't really like right now. Like, in other words, you don't have to pay to trade, just like with TD Ameritrade or any of these other big platforms that got rid of their fees, but that's only because they're selling your trading data to high frequency trading firms, and that's how they're making their money, which is again I have a major problem with, which is not good. FTX, obviously Sam Bankman-Fried. There's just there seems to be a lot of issues with the tech industry right now with this whole concept of move fast and break something. Yeah, that's not so good. And then we've all just seen recently the big blow up at OpenAI with Sam Altman and everything that's going on there. And that fight seemed to be over how fast do you move? I mean, there were people there that saw concerns with AI and how fast it was moving, and the fact that it could potentially be extremely harmful. And I think they just wanted to slow things down a little bit, wanted to make sure that there were some guardrails there and that things were just being done appropriately. And yet that didn't seem to be the case. It didn't seem to be what was going on right there. Also, you've got, gambling. You got, companies like DraftKings, other kings that are other companies that are out there. So a lot of examples out there right now of just a lot of these supposed tech companies or people in the tech sphere that are doing a lot of things right now that I think are being very harmful and being very detrimental to people out there. So I think it might be time to have a conversation about the whole tech philosophy in Silicon Valley of move fast and break things, because I think it's going to lead to a lot of problems for a lot of people here very shortly. But anyway, I digress for a minute. So how does this relate back to banking? So I think this is a great case of, when you're in banking and you're lending money to businesses, everybody that comes in's got a great idea. Everybody's got the next big thing. And you really have to stop and you have to think very deeply about what it is you're doing and how are you doing it. Bankers are always trained to look at the downside risk. What's the worst case scenario here? If this company blows up, how does it blow up? And and I think that's a very critical lesson. And what happens is a lot of times, as a banker, people come in and they feel like you're poo-pooing their idea, or you're basically saying like, oh, this is garbage, it'll never work, whatever, blah blah blah. And look, entrepreneurs they're entrepreneurs for a reason. They're very enthusiastic, they're very positive, they want, they have this, oh, I've got this great idea, I'm going to go out and conquer the world and this, that, and the other thing. And that's all great, but again, you have to be realistic, and you have to think very deeply about what it is you're doing and how you're doing it. What are the potential pitfalls? How could this go horribly wrong? I think I like to say, think of your worst day and what does that look like? What does your worst day look like? And then that'll give you some perspective in terms of what do you need to do to make sure that things continue to just, go the right way. Um, so I think from a banking standpoint, you look at this and you go, okay, well, you're going to market this. How are you going to market this? Oh, we're going to market this to young people. Really? You're going to market a potentially nicotine addicting product to young kids? Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think we want to go down that road. That sounds like something that's going to end up in disaster, which is exactly, what happened here. But it doesn't appear that anybody really thought that through from the beginning. So what are some of the lessons learned here with this? I think that, marketing, how you market, um, obviously leadership, management styles, there's a lot more. One of the things I love about these case studies is when you talk about leadership and management, there's a lot more to running a company than simply having a cool product or being a tech savvy person. You've got to know, there's so many things that you got to know of in terms of the supply chain out there, but also just the business supply chain, what's going on. I think back to Michael Porter, and I think back to all the different things, the value chain and all of the different things that he espoused and came and created in terms of thinking about a company and all its different departments and how they all work together, and how you need to have everybody needs to be flowing on the same page to make something work and function. So, again, there's a lot more that goes into a company, and you've got to have the right people in place around you to make any company successful. And and again, you really have to look at what's the culture at the company. What kind of culture are we creating? Um, and again, these guys were all stuck on this kind of effective altruism thing, which I think needs its own episode, because that was something that came up a lot with the Sam Bankman-Fried stuff with FTX, and seems to be very prevalent throughout Silicon Valley right now. So that's something we need to talk about more in depth. Um, so lessons. So again, lessons learned here. Just to recap, don't again. You need to make sure you have the right leadership and in place that has the right vision, that is setting the right type of culture for the company, that you have the right people in the company. Don't just hire your friends, hire people that are professionals, that know what they're doing, that have some experience at this stuff. Maybe moving fast and break things is not the best business model after all. Certainly don't market to kids. You got to be very mindful about social media and how it can go horribly wrong, and how things can backfire on you. Um, And then, so let's get in here. So what did I like and what did I dislike about this? So what did I like? I liked it had a great story. It was well produced. It had an excellent business case of what was going on here. It was very entertaining. It was a very interesting story. What did I dislike? There was not enough information around the drug aftermarket, that, what was really, what else was happening in the vaping world, so to speak. And then just again, not enough information on the vaping industry in general. Like, where is it at today? I mean, obviously, vaping has still become a very big industry, still very popular. There's vape shops all over the place. So even though Juul might be dying out, obviously there's a lot of other companies still out there making money off the whole big vape phenomenon. So how do I rate this? Basically, I give this 5 stars out of 5. I just thought it was an excellent documentary, excellent short series there on Netflix, and I would highly recommend anybody to go on and check it out. I think it was definitely well worth the watch. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this review of Big Vape, The Rise and Fall of Juul. It was a great series. Go check it out on Netflix, and definitely come back and check out some of my other episodes. If you hadn't had a chance yet to check out the crypto series, I did the first 2 episodes of that. Next week, I will be coming out hopefully with the next 2 episodes in that installment of the crypto series, basically looking at the implosion in the crypto market in 2022, and then how did that lead into the banking collapse that happened earlier this year of 2023. So, but definitely go, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please leave a comment below. I love getting comments from people, and definitely look forward to see if I can interact and get some comments back to everybody. Make sure to go check out the Banker Next Door at the www.thebankernextdoor.com. And again, we are on YouTube and Rumble and all major podcast platforms. So please, like I said, give us a like, leave a comment. That stuff always helps the channel, and I hope to see everyone again real soon. So thanks a lot and enjoy. Have a great weekend.